Hey writers, welcome back to my channel where we are unpacking the hero's journey. We have looked deep into the different kinds of heroes there are, and that's been really fun for me to really dig deep in the different types. And if you want to watch those videos, head back over there and have a quick look. But now let's talk about those 12 must-have scenes, those must-have plot points that you've got to have if you're going to stick to the hero's journey. But first, let's roll the intro.
What if I told you that you have all the tools you need to write a great story, and these tools were not limiting, but freeing? Join me as we unpack our writer's toolbox and find your story the way you want to tell it, one tool at a time.
All right, so we are going to look at these must-have plot points. So we know the circle. We all know the circle where we sit down and we think about the journey of the hero as we go around. We know who our hero is. We've picked one of those classic characters, the epic, the tragic, or the every, or the classic, those characters that we know, that we love, and we know what they have to have on their journeys. But what do every single one of them have to have? Well, they have to have these different plot points in their stories. And the first one, the number one thing that needs to happen. First, let's think that not only do these stories have to have these plot points, they don't always have to happen the same way, and they don't always have to be long, but they always have to be there. And they also always have to be in order. You can't have them out of order, and they happen in 3 segments. So in your Act 1, your Act 2, and your Act 3 in the 3-act story structure as we go around the circle. So, confused yet? Don't worry, we're going to unpack this. It's going to be super easy, I promise. So let's first look at Act 1. All right, so in Act 1, there are 5 scenes. 5 of the 12 are in your first act, which is kind of crazy because oftentimes we want that first act to happen super fast. And there are times where these 5 scenes happen in a sense of the first few pages, the first chapter, or even in the opening credits of a film.
In the opening scenes of Waitress, for example, we have the first 3 of these plot points. We establish the ordinary world. We have the call to action.
You've put it off long enough.
What?
You know what?
And we have the refusal of the call.
Come on, negative. Come on.
Dear Lord, please protect our Jenna from the hell of unwanted pregnancy.
I don't need no baby. I don't want no trouble. I just want to make pies. That's all I want to do, make pies.
And we're going to talk about that and how we can have these happen super fast, but they need to happen in that first act. So the first thing is we need to establish the ordinary world. Now, this could be the Muggle world of Harry Potter or the village life of Belle, but it could also be the pie-making kitchen of Carrie in Carrie's character, Jenna, in Waitress. It could also be the play life of Sarah in Labyrinth. It could be the space shuttle life of the crew of The Martian. The ordinary world doesn't have to be supernatural in feeling. It could be as simple as getting ready for school in Bridge to Tabithia. I can never say that word. It could be as simple as a job interview in The Shining. It could be anything like that that just establishes the world in which our character currently resides. The second thing that needs to happen, once we've established the ordinary world, is we need to establish a call to action. Now, this is absolutely crucial no matter what kind of story you're telling. If you're going to have a story, you need to have a call to action.
And speaking of call to action, if you like what you're seeing so far, don't forget to smash that like button and hit that subscribe to see more videos like this in the future. And if you want to dig even deeper, then head over to my Patreon account where you can download all the workbooks, activities, and helpful hints that come from these videos. All right, let's hop back into it and see where we can find the call to action in the hero's journey.
you need to have a call to action for your character. So this could be a letter from Hogwarts. This could be being fired from the job in the Joker. This could be anything that happens that takes our characters and moves them, pushes them out of their comfort zone. That is what a call to action is. It is just pushing your main character, that protagonist, whoever that person is, into the new world and out of their comfort zone.
In Fight Club, for example, we spend a lot of time establishing the ordinary world, that the narrator has insomnia and how he meets Marla. It isn't until almost a third of the way through the movie that we actually get the second item, the call to action.
Do you have somebody you can call?
The narrator can't get a clearer call to action. He is asked if there's someone he can call, and in the great explosion that destroyed his entire apartment and all his IKEA furniture, his little phone number from Marla is saved.
Now, every single character, regardless of what kind of journey they're on, they are going to refuse the call. The initial call, this call to action, that is the greatest thing that is in every story, is refused by every single character when it first happens.
Yeah. I can hear you breathing.
So in Fight Club, when the narrator has the option of calling Marla, she doesn't. She calls Tyler Durden, or he calls Tyler Durden. Or when Frodo realizes that he is going to have to take the ring, somebody has to take the ring. We can hide it. You take it. He tries to do everything he can other than take the ring himself. Harry and Waitress, when she's taking the pregnancy test, she says, I don't want to have a baby. I don't want no trouble. I just want to make pies. I just want to make pies. Right? She's refusing the call. So it can be really simple. Now remember, in Waitress, that is all. We have had the establishing the ordinary world, we've had the call to action, and we have had the refusal of the call, and we are barely out of the credits. We are in the first 5 minutes. It is insane how great and tight that is. Doesn't have to be long. Whereas Fight Club, we don't have the call to action. We don't have the explosion in his apartment until about 20 minutes into the movie. Because we take so long to establish the ordinary world. And that is okay. That is fine. You have to serve the story. And you have to do what needs to be done. In Harry Potter, the letter comes in chapter 3. The letter arrives, I believe. And in the movies, it's about 10 minutes in, I think. And the refusal of the call, it actually comes in the form of, isn't until he meets the mentor, which is Hagrid. And in that scene, while he's meeting that mentor, he says, "You're a wizard, Harry." He says, "No, I can't be a wizard," right? And refuses the call. But it all happens in and of itself, so it's still happening in order. You following? Great. All right. So we have that's 3 in the opening act. We have the establishing the ordinary world, the call to action, the refusal of the call. And I've mentioned it already, meeting the mentor. Now, I'm going to break down in future weeks who the mentor is, and there are different kinds of mentors. So we're going to break deep into this scene, especially when we start looking at the 8 characters in the hero's journey and which ones you need to have. So obviously we've looked at the hero before, and the second one is the mentor. So you want to tune in for that. So hit that subscribe button if you want to see that, because that one's going to be a goodie. I really am excited about that. But we're going to gloss over it a bit here because we have the meet the mentor scene. So whoever that is, in Harry Potter, it's Hagrid. In Waitress, it is probably her doctor becomes sort of the mentor in that sense. And then in Fight Club, the narrator's mentor is Tyler Durden, who is also the Shadow, which again is another one of those characters. You will not want to miss these videos. Hit that subscribe button. And then we have the fifth and final part of the first act of your story is crossing the threshold. In this scene, we also meet the Threshold Guardian. Now that we're going to look at the Threshold Guardian and who that could be. I've already touched on a little bit, saying that Uncle Vernon acts as a Threshold Guardian in Harry Potter. And that is the person who hinders, who blocks. So the mentor is trying to teach and lead the hero onto the journey, and the Threshold Guardian is trying to limit and stop them. And the Threshold Guardian doesn't always have to be a person. It's oftentimes a person, but it can also be a force to be reckoned with. So in The Lord of the Rings, Gandalf would definitely qualify as that mentor character to Frodo, but the Threshold Guardian would be even just his own challenges of leaving the Shire. He hasn't ever left the Shire, and you could say that maybe the Night Riders are in his way, but also just the terrain is in his way because he's crossing that threshold. It's that first journey, first part of the journey before he meets Strider, that is definitely him crossing the threshold. And it isn't until he meets Strider, which is his first ally, that we really hit into the second act. And that brings us to the sixth part and the first part of our second act. So heading into that second act, we've got 3 scenes out of the 12. We've got our first 5 from first act. To recap, you establish the ordinary world, you have your call to action, refuse the call, meet the mentor, and cross the threshold, and that takes us into the second act of the story if you're following the 3-act story structure. And then we hit our 6th mandatory scene, which is actually a series of scenes. It's your challenges, your tests, and your allies. So as I mentioned, Strider definitely falls into that ally category, as do Pippin and Merry and Sam for Frodo. For Harry, he meets Ron and Hermione on the train. And he also meets, in Diagon Alley, he meets Draco. And he thinks maybe Draco might be an ally and then realizes he's not. He is going to be an enemy. And he passes his first test, which is not to just automatically fall into the prejudice that is in the wizarding world. And so on and so forth. He has his very first test in the Sorting Hat, where he refuses to be put into Slytherin and requests to be put anywhere else. Please don't put me in Slytherin. Anywhere else. And that is a very strong test of character. He also faces challenges in that first book, especially as he goes through literal tests in school. And he fails some of them. He doesn't get the Wingardium Leviosa that Hermione picks up straight away. But then he fights the troll. And the challenges get progressively further on, right? Jenna, Carrie Russell's character in Waitress, also goes through tests and challenges and meets allies. We meet her allies really early on. But then they join her and they bring her along and they're trying to help her with accepting this baby. We also meet an enemy in her husband, who is the shadow of the whole story. But again, we're going to talk more about these characters and who they are and what they represent when we look at the 8 necessary characters in the story, because ultimately these scenes come alive because the characters are wonderful. So while these scenes are so important to have, I really want to look at them through the veil of the characters. But let's get an overview first, and then hit that subscribe button and we'll break down. First we'll do an overview of the 8 characters that you need, and we'll break them down one by one and show the different kinds of mentors, the different kinds of heralds, the different kinds of allies that you can have in your story. That'll be so good. But first, let's get an overview. So like I said, 6 is actually a series, and oftentimes people like to say a series of a series of 3 tests and challenges and allies. So one that they meet somebody and you meet it and then they do something and you achieve it together. When Frodo has to meet the test of whether or not to give the ring to the Dark Riders and he doesn't, he gets stabbed. That is a challenge and a test. And then he meets the allies and he gets on to when he goes to the elves, and then he meets another test where he says, I will take it, and so on and so forth through the story. Carrie has a series of tests, literal tests, in that she's going through different tests and challenges with her pregnancy, but also tests of character as she decides whether or not to continue to lie to her husband, whether or not to continue her affair. And she fails and she succeeds and she fails. And that is what makes the middle build so powerful. So at the end of the middle build, after we've had a series of challenges, we have the big test. We have the approach of the inner cave. And this is often the scene right before what is called the long dark night of the soul, or the abyss, or just that bottom of that circle. So we have that there, and we know that we've tried some things that didn't work, and now we need to push on into that. And for Carrie, Jenna, Carrie Russell's character in Waitress, she does this by breaking off her affair. For Frodo, this comes around during the fight where Boromir is killed and he has to separate from the group at the end of Fellowship of the Ring, when the Fellowship dissolves. For Harry, this comes down in the very much near the end, where he has to send Hermione back with Ron after the chess match, and he has to go in by himself, and he needs to go and face that alone. It's very, very important that our hero goes into the ordeal, the abyss, alone, that they are all by themselves, that they have reached the absolute bottom of their journey. This is why it's at the bottom of the circle. And this is generally at the end of the mid-build, the second act. Sometimes it'll be at the beginning of the third act, which brings us to the third act, which often begins with the reward. So this is what happens when they go through the ordeal. They receive a reward, and oftentimes that reward is what they use to defeat the villain, the shadow character at the very end. So for Harry, it could be 2 things. It could be one where Hermione says, "You're a great wizard, Harry." And then it could also be in the book, so it's skipped in the movie. In the book, when he solves the puzzle, he goes into the room all by himself and has to solve the puzzle with all the elixirs. And he goes in them by himself, and it's something he knows Hermione would be able to do like that. But anyway, he fixes it, and then he goes through, and when he walks through and he looks in the mirror, he receives the Philosopher's Stone in his pocket, which is a literal reward for having gotten as far as he has, and for looking into that mirror and seeing that he wants to get the stone but not use it, which is a reward of character. When we look at Frodo, his reward for going off by himself is that Sam comes with him. I think that that's his reward for going by himself and going through the ordeal, because Sam is Frodo's reward. His friendship is definitely that thing that makes it really strong. In Waitress, Jenna's character, Carrie Russell's character, Jenna, her reward is when the doctor shows up and wants to learn how to make a pie, and they make a beautiful pie together, and then he shares with her in her stories, and she begins the best conversation of her life, she says, where she gets a best friend. It's not an affair anymore. It's now becomes something more where she feels heard. And that is her reward, which is actually, I believe, exactly what she uses to beat the big bad in the end. All three of them, the Philosopher's Stone in his pocket, and he doesn't, when Voldemort realizes he's got it, he touches him and he dissolves. And he wouldn't have done that otherwise. And that's what makes him win in the end. Carrie's, the fact that she feels heard gives her the voice to say to her husband, no, I don't want to see you anymore, and get out of my life at the very end and say goodbye to the shadow character and actually stand up for herself. And ultimately to break the dependency on the doctor. It's just absolutely wonderful. So that's the reward. And I think this is something a lot of writers forget. I'm spending a lot of time on the reward, but it's something that they forget. We remember to put our characters through the ringer. We remember the ordeal, but we forget to reward them on the other side. And that is what gives us that makes the ordeal worthwhile, because we've got the tool we need to defeat the big bad in the end. And people might not be able to say, your readers might not be able to say what it is about the story that's missing. But I guarantee if you don't have that reward, they will feel that it is missing, and there will not be that cathartic ending, especially if you're writing a tragic hero, especially if you're writing like Spike Spiegel. When he goes through his ordeal, if he didn't have a reward for going through it, we wouldn't feel that power at the end. All right, three more at the end of your story. So the road back. You got to promise. This is another thing writers forget. You got to promise the road back. Remember, it's a circle. That doesn't mean that the road back is going to be without bumps. But somewhere before the end of your story, you have to show your reader how your characters are going to get back. How are they going to get back? So this is done in Lord of the Rings really beautifully when Frodo and Sam talk about getting back to have strawberries and cream at the end. It's really, really beautiful and powerful there. Now, they feel really hopeless, but the promise of strawberries and cream in the Shire is a really powerful way of showing the road back. When Carrie is at her lowest and she feels she can't do anything else, the doctor promises that he will take her somewhere and they will figure it out, and maybe they'll even run away. Now, obviously, that never happens. That doesn't happen in Waitress because the water breaks and everything changes. But because we have that promise, we pulls us through. Okay, all right, we're going to get back again. We're going to get back to that ordinary world that we loved. With Harry, obviously, it's the end of school. He's going back home. And that is our promise of the road back. And might not be a happy promise, but then we also have the promise of the road back to come back to school in year 2. So last 2, the resurrection, which is your final battle. It is birth in Waitress. It is her rejecting her husband in Waitress. It is the ring being destroyed by Gollum. It is everything that happens at the end of the story, and it can be really short, really powerful, but it is that final battle between the light and the shadow. It is your protagonist versus your antagonist. It is your climax. And then don't forget your return. Now, the return might not be the road back. It might not be. Carrie doesn't run away. In Waitress, she does not run away, but she has a road back to herself, and it's better because it's a journey of character, and she rejects her husband, she rejects her doctor and having an affair, but she goes and we've had the promise of that pie contest from day one. She goes and she wins it because we know she's going to win it, and she opens her own pie shop. And then the road back is her, and the return is her returning to herself, and it's absolutely beautiful. In Fight Club, it is when he and Marla are standing there in those beautiful windows watching the world come crashing down around them. And you met me at a very strange time in my life. So we have returned to Marla. And that is it. That is your 12 steps in the hero's journey. To recap, you have established the ordinary world. You have a call to action. Refuse the call. Meet the mentor. Crossing the threshold. Challenges. Test and allies. Approach the inner cave at the bottom of the circle. The ordeal. The reward. The road back. The resurrection. And the return. And next time we will be breaking down with an overview of the 8 mandatory characters in a hero's journey. Hint, 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 we've already looked pretty in depth into one. And then we will be breaking those down even further. This series is going to go really deep, really far. And if you want me to go deeper into any of these scenes, let me know in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button. Give me some love, y'all. And keep writing.